breakdown is that we're going to spend the next 10, 12 minutes or so going around the virtual room and doing some introductions, right? After that, we're going to break out into some smaller groups so y'all can get to know each other a little better, right? And discuss some of the readings that we sent out over the weekend. And finally, we'll come back together, put it all together, and take questions and do some general housekeeping, right? Today's session is largely informational and setting us up on framing this conversation and this work, right? Again, my name is Aqib Yaqub. I think I'm the one male-bodied person in the Women's March team nationally. I've been on the team since 2017 in multiple different capacities, and I'm back on to support Women's March with our celebrity and influencer engagement, a lot of which touches its digital defender work, right? I'm glad and I'm honored to be here working with you all and look forward to building. I'm going to turn the floor over very quickly for some introductions from my colleague, Noor Mir, who has known me since I was a teenager.
Yep, that's right. Hi, my name is Noor. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I will be your primary contact for all things digital defenders over the course of this curriculum and moving forward. So you'll be hearing a lot from me, and I appreciate all that y'all are doing. I live in Washington, D.C. Some of the work that I do primarily is around immigration, ending the Muslim ban, and also doing work around police accountability and ending gun violence here in D.C. and nationally. Some of the experiences that I've had with the Women's March over the past 2 years, well, I would say the primary bulk has been around mass mobilization strategy. So really training people to step into their own power, to take direct action, to use it as a tool in the toolbox for change. So that's sort of where my heart lies. And a lot of the work that I do in DC is around training people in nonviolent civil disobedience and the strategy and history behind it. And I've also done a fair amount of work with our field organizing network and bring some of those stories and that experience to the table as well. So it's great to meet you all, and thank you for being here.
Perfect. Thank you, Noor Mir. Can we turn it over to Kristen?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Branken. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an organizer with Women's March Vermont, and I am based in Burlington, Vermont right now. I'm really excited to be here with everybody on the phone tonight. Now, certainly more than ever, it's really critical to have a strong digital activism platform, particularly as Aqib mentioned with the coronavirus, which very much limits our on-the-ground options. And it's an honor to be on the call with Aqib and Noor. I've worked with them before, and you're in for a real treat. I'm happy to play a support role while they take you through this.
Perfect. On your screen, you'll also see Heather Woods, and we'll introduce Heather in a little bit. Heather's our guest speaker for tonight, right? But to jump us and ground us back into things, right? We can jump, actually before I'm like, you know what? Yes, let's do this, right? Before we jump in, there's so much anxieties right now in the air. There's so much, let's say, chaotic vibrations moving around. We're in a global pandemic, and that means a lot, right? I feel personally, the last three, almost 4 weeks, my entire life, 20 hours a day have been seeped in responding to the coronavirus. Endless conversations, endless prep in my home, right? My partner is a public school teacher in New York City. It's endless conversations, endless prep in our home. And I think it's important that we really ground ourselves in this moment, right? It's important that we just take a moment for us, right? So if folks will indulge me a little bit, I'm just gonna lead us through a little breathing exercise. It's something I meditate every day. It's one of the ways that I personally keep grounded and moving forward in the case of a lot of crises and chaos, which is my profession also, right? So if folks can do it with me, I would appreciate it, right? We'll do 4 breaths together, right? And if you just follow my voice and we'll do it. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. If not, you can keep looking at our pretty faces, all right? So I invite you to take a deep breath. and hold it. Now take a little bit more, just a little bit more. Fill up your entire chest cavity. Fill up your belly a little bit. Now slowly release it through your nose in a controlled way. As we do this work, it's important that we center wellness, right? We are oftentimes frontline defenders, right? We're oftentimes the people that our family look up to the most, and we're holding a lot of folks down, including ourselves, right? As you take another breath, send a little love to yourself, because we've been going through it, right? Deep breath. When you let go in a second, I want you to relax your shoulders, right? And let go through your nose. Another deep breath through your mouth. A little bit more. Hold it for 4, 3, 2. Let it go and shake your arms out a bit. And final breath, deep breath. And as you release it, think of something that you want to manifest, that you want to bring into your life, into the world. And let it go. Perfect. Thank you again, right? My name is Zakib. It is an honor to be here with all of you tonight, right? Thank you for taking the time to do this important work. We're so grateful for each and every one of you. And I look forward to building with you all over the course of the next couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months, and couple of years, right? So we'll jump into it, but we want to know a little bit of who you all are. We have lots of folks on the line. So I'm going to ask if you can share in the little chat feature on Zoom, your name, first name, pronouns, city, and state. Nora and I will call some of them out. We see somebody from, we see Wisconsin in the house. We see Toronto in the house.
New Zealand.
New Zealand, there we go. Marco Island, Florida. Fort Worth, Texas. See Egg Harbor City, New Jersey. Medford, Oregon. A couple of folks from Oregon, some folks from Ohio, Santa Barbara, California, Nova Scotia, Sacramento,
Ocean City, Maryland, England, Corona, California, Durham, North Carolina, Manhattan, Kansas, the Little Apple, and Boston. A few folks here from New York City, and the state.
As we're, and I didn't say I'm from, I'm based in Astoria, Queens, in New York. You know,
we have someone here from India.
Sweet.
Welcome.
Welcome. I see somebody from Astoria, Oregon. I'm in Astoria, New York. All right. As we all come on and we're practicing social distancing and we're learning what social distancing is, a lot of us are quarantined away in our homes. A lot of us are locked away from loved ones that we deeply care about, from friends or from family, right? It's important that we build community. And one of our goals of this Digital Defenders program is to build community online, right? At the end of this 3-day training program, you will graduate into a cohort, a community of folks who will be checking in with each other, chatting with each other, sharing information, asking for help, leaning on for each other for support, right? So we want to, hopefully we can use this space over the course of the next 3 nights as a space where we can build with each other and in community, right? See some Cape Cod and some other folk in here, right? I'm going to share briefly with folks, right, just our grand vision for Digital Defenders. What is this program about? Why become a digital defender? What is the purpose of digital? What are the purposes? There are many of Digital Defenders. And I'll turn it over to Heather Woods to lend her expertise and a deeper dive into why now and why this moment. So Digital Defenders, as the name suggests, it's a team of progressive allies, femmes, women who are coming together to reclaim online spaces, to counter online narratives, to counter alt-right's trolls and radicalization of young folk, right? Digital defenders are trained up on messaging tools and skills. You will be equipped with resources and knowledge to go out into that vast digital landscape. For this first phase of this program, we will be focusing on YouTube and Instagram, where we see a lot of radicalization happening, right? Where we see a lot of misinformation being spread. But we will, of course, grow that over time, right, to address other platforms as well, right? As a digital defender, again, you have those tools. We, as your command center at Women's March, as well as some other organizations or partners who you will meet over the course of the next 2 days, on Sierra Club, Mi Gente, a number of other progressive groups who are all teaming up together to make this program possible. We will be strategically deploying our digital defenders to different spaces to help drive narratives, to help shift values, and to help reclaim our communities, right? To make wins. We tonight are going to review a number of the readings that have grounded us on this training and why we're here together. But before we jump into all of that, I want to turn it over to Heather Woods, who is a professor at the University of Kansas. Heather is a co-author of Make America Meme Again, which is one of the grounding texts of this digital defender program and strategy, right? After Heather tells us a little bit more about why now and why this moment, we'll open up the floor for some questions from folks online, right? And then I'll talk a little bit about our strategy and how we deploy digital defenders and what we expect of the folks once you're trained. Heather?
Thanks so much. Can everybody hear me okay? I think I'm unmuted. Groovy. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Heather Woods. I am an assistant professor of rhetoric and technology at Kansas State. And I have been working with Women's March in a sort of an advisory capacity in terms of their digital strategy because my expertise is in communication online, digital media, digital communication, and I've been studying those spaces for about a decade. I started thinking about the ways that movements shift when they incorporate digital elements. I spent quite a bit of time studying hashtags. As was previously mentioned, I'm the co-author of Make America Meme Again, which is a book about the 2016 presidential election. And if you're interested in that, the website makeamericameme.com has a bunch of resources that are freely available to you. So when I was thinking about what makes this moment so special and what our charge is, I was thinking about probably some of the same reasons you all are here, right? If you signed up for this program, you are acutely aware of how important digital communication is, that it has become, to some extent, the center of our interpersonal world, our social world, and certainly our political world. And so something that we argue in our most recent research is that one of the most important elements of online communication is that it is multifaceted and that oftentimes it appears as if it is unimportant. And I want to explain what that means. So in terms of multifaceted, scholarship in my area of study has pretty decisively concluded that online communication can do a lot of things that quote unquote offline communication can do. It's good for communicating with others, to persuade others, to build community with others, to come together into a movement with others, but it has some differences. One of them is the speed by which things circulate. The second is that it can draw together people from great distances. And the third is that it invites more and different people to communicate in different ways. Now, on the one hand, the idea that more and different voices can be included in digital spaces is something to celebrate, right? The idea that there has been gate-kept media that traditionally excluded people on the margins is enough of a reason to celebrate that digital media invites us to speak in more and different ways than we had previously done before. However, just because we can create movements and organize and identify with one another and communicate across great distance does not mean that others are also not doing that. And so the question is, how do we counter the weaponization of digital media that is undermining the democratic ethos that so many of us work toward, towards a progressive politics that incorporates more and different people? And we found that the far right, sometimes known as the alt-right, which is a branding technique or strategy, is especially great at harnessing all of the most beautiful parts of online or digital communication, but weaponizing them, right? And rather than inviting people into a productive community for discourse, dialogue, and debate, they undercut those capacities. They weaponize misinformation against various communities. They antagonize groups of people. They take over icons or visual images and they imbue them with really intense racial and gendered politics. And they do it on a pretty significant ecosystem of websites that then translates into institutional politics, including that of upper leadership in the United States. And so our charge at this point is to respond to this outflanking of the alt-right and hold on to the strategies that support conversation that is productive and progressive and brings more and different people into the fold. In terms of what we can do, I'm really excited to be part of this training to see what this training looks like. One of the things we notice in the book is that some of the most pernicious but important and useful and highly effective techniques of online communication is making it seem like online communication is not important, that it's silly, that it doesn't have a politics, etc. In the case of more recent events, I think we've seen it acutely with COVID-19, in which a lack of leadership, communication, and sort of directive have led people to try and find alternate ways of communicating, and that spreads misinformation, xenophobia, those sorts of things. And so my charge to you is threefold. One, make sure that you take good care of yourself and others while doing this work. The idea of the sort of centering breath work was really lovely for me because I realized that I'd been holding my breath for the past 2.5 weeks. And so finding ways to take care of yourself and others is going to be really important as you sort of dig in the trenches of some of the sketchy parts of the internet, right? Second, respond to misinformation and false facts, but also try and find ways to communicate with people on an emotional level, right? Oftentimes people speak out of fear or out of anxiety, and recognizing that on a human element can make us more persuasive online. I think that in terms of the recent pandemic, a lot of fears and anxieties are leading to misinformation and people striking out against people on the margins in a very uncool and frankly dangerous way, right? We have some evidence that this online vitriol is spreading into offline spaces. And this training will equip you to make a big difference. It will help you to be a thought leader and a change maker in a space that is very much open for conversation if we get to help set the terms instead of simply responding to, for instance, the alt-right. So I'm really excited to see the structure of Digital Defenders, and I'm really excited to see what the cohort does in those spaces. Okay, I want to pause there and see if there are any questions.
If you have a question, you can just pop it into the chat box and we'll read it out.
We'll give it a minute or two for folks to type things in.
Groovy.
Yes, it is very okay to take notes while speakers are talking. That was a question.
Okay, we have a question from Erica. It's a really good question. I think about this often myself. So Erica said, I started following some right-wingers in the beginning to be informed, but they overtook my feed and I had to block them. How can I observe without losing my progressive feed?
Yeah, so that's a tough question, in part because your social media feeds are not only curated by you, but they're curated by the larger platforms that get to sort of decide what content happens on your feed. And I am generally, as a supporter of democratic deliberation and conversation, in favor of including people with lots of different perspectives on your social media feed, because I think that that's the basis of coming together, is persuading people with whom you have shared interests, but also people who are different than you, right? That's the sort of basis of democracy, e pluribus unum, out of many one. So there are some things that you can do. For instance, on Twitter, you can block particular people or you can mute particular people. And there are very good guides online to how to do that. You can report particular people. I'm not sure how many people use, there's different ways to set up groups on like Facebook and Twitter so that you can have I don't know, like your coworkers or your family members or something like that. So if you don't have the bandwidth to like get into it with everybody who comes across your feed, you can sort of pivot to the thing that you really want to see. And then something that I've been doing as part of an intentional practice of media consumption. So I'm a digital media scholar. My job is to look at the internet. I have to pace myself. And I try and set a timer on my phone or on my watch or something. And at the end of the timer, I get up and I like walk my dog, or I do something analog, or I go make a cup of tea or something. And I find that if I do that, I can't get sucked into the vortex of, you know, people who may not have my best interest in mind.
Heather. The next question is from Sue, and it is, what sources do you use to be informed?
Also a great question. I like to look at a number of different sources from a number of different people, while recognizing that each one of those sources is going to give me something different, and they're going to have a bit of a bias or political bent from what I'm looking at. So again, that's the reason why I think it's really helpful to have people with different perspectives around you digitally, so you can see how people are communicating about things. Trusted news outlets are places where I go to get information. I also oftentimes, in the event of a particular event, I try and create or follow other experts in that space. So I actually, on Instagram, I follow a group of people who are epidemiologists. They are, they're not influencers, they're just people who research like disease, and they have become one of my most important modes of communication. So one thing that you can do is make sure that you recognize that there's going to be inherent bias in different communication formats. The second is look for expertise. Theoretically, if someone has a PhD, that means they've gone through some processes to vet them. But also look for people who are impacted on the ground, as those people will oftentimes have really good firsthand information about what to do. Finally, peer-reviewed academic sources are becoming increasingly online in a world in which many universities are going online. So I hate to rep a particular platform, but I use scholar.google.com oftentimes to search for things, and I find pretty good information there. And then there's a really great site called The Conversation, which translates academic peer-reviewed content into a more easily accessible format. So that was a long-winded answer to a short question, but it's a good one and it's a hard one.
Thank you, Heather. We had a clarifying question from Crystal, who's taking notes. One of them was, I have number 1 is making sure you're taking care of yourself. 2 was responding to misinformation on an emotional level, and she didn't quite catch number 3 in what you said. And Eileen said that she thinks number 3 was to prepare yourself to know you'll be making a difference as a thought leader and change speaker. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it was about the fact that this training can make a big difference.
Right.
And that communicating with people online is an increasingly important space. So the fact that you're here means that you're making a difference in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Heather. We had a question that also resonates with me, which is from Maureen, which is, do you have advice for perfectionists about committing to respond to the misinformation without overanalyzing my response?
Oh man. That's hard. I can say what I have done that's been helpful for me. One of them is the technique where I give myself a certain amount of time to respond and then I walk away after a period of time. I have also been meditating and like doing yoga and offline activities that help center myself. And the third thing to do, I don't know, I think that I've been seeing a bunch of leaders step up and be willing to make mistakes, right? Which means embracing the humanity in all of us and like giving ourselves the care, grace, and consideration that we would hope for other people. So shout out from one perfectionist to another. We're going to get through this. I think the point is to do something and continually learn as we go.
Great. Thanks, Heather.
Yeah.
Another great question from Claire. What tips do you have to figure out what is misinformation today on social media, as many things can be very convincing and seem truthful?
Yeah, good question. Oftentimes I start with sort of like the nose test, or some of my students call it the BS test. If something feels off, there's a good chance that it might be. So recognizing that that is the case, that social media can be very persuasive, that sometimes information gets shared out of context, and if it feels a little wrong, that's the time to start investigating from one of your other sources. If I remember correctly, this training does work on that particular question, gets more in the weeds. Is that right? On how to determine misinformation from not misinformation?
That's right. And I believe that, sort of our issue specific trainings over the next few days will help us, spot that stuff exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
We will also be, as part of the training, we will be providing a resource bank of just a number of fact-checking tools, some of which Heather mentioned. I'll make sure I get those names from Heather as well, so we include it in there, and then some issue-specific tools, for sure.
All right. So the next question is from Christina, and it is, are there stats about how big the alt-right or the far-right is as a percentage? And is the aim with the Women's March Digital Defenders to reach the middle as opposed to the right? For example, research shows that climate deniers make up only 10 to 15% of the population. And when trying to prevent misinformation spread, it is best to focus on the 40% in the middle who may be unduly influenced by that small number of deniers?
Yeah, also a great question. So I don't have hard and fast statistics. My focus in my research was studying the spread of alt-right content. So I less counted the people or the bots or the news sites or the aggregators, human and non-human, that sent out the information, and more I traced the spread of that information. So I think that you're right, that there are some folks with whom you may disagree or disagree with strongly, that are going to listen to a well-reasoned, logical pitch from you about truth and about facts and things that exist in the world, and some people just aren't, right? But I think what we can learn from the alt-right or the far right, or whatever sort of language you want to use for that group of people, is that they're very good at using the digital sphere to transmit their messages. And they have created an opportunity where they take memes, which are sort of silly, nonsensical, oftentimes don't make a lot of sense, and they've turned it into recruitment techniques, ways to identify with people. And so if you followed, for instance, Pepe the Frog, that particular icon or image was silly, right? It was not originally for the alt-right, but they took it up and then they circulated it over time. And so we can learn from those strategies, and there are groups of people who are doing it on the left and in the center. But yeah, I don't have hard and fast statistics on that. I care more about the persuasive elements. Yeah.
And I can add to that as well. So I think it was Christina who asked the question, right? And for everyone else, we will be right now focusing on, in this first phase of Digital Defenders, focusing on the folks who are largely in the middle, right? Who we know we can move and we can shift opinions of. A lot of our work over the next couple of weeks and months will focus on reinforcing positive messaging shared by allies, right? We know from deep canvassing work, right, that when we interact and uplift messages that align and people that align with our values, we usually reach a far wider audience, right? So tomorrow and Wednesday, we'll be training in some of those specific techniques of how to reach people most effectively, right? How do you jump into a common thread that's very toxic, pull out the people who are positive, reinforce that, say you feel them, I hear you, and here's some more resources to help drive this conversation in a positive way, right? Our goal is to shift sentiments, right? And to really move people away from polarization, move the conversation away from divisiveness and into a place where we can start to get concrete wins, right? I would like to add a bit to just hearing some of the questions and some of the conversation. On the political left, right, we have some, I personally think we have some of the best organizers in the world, right? And I think we're also being grossly out-organized in many ways, right? Our Digital Defenders are a decentralized network. You all are a decentralized network of folks that we're going to train you up, right? And you just going to be out in the universe interacting with people in your day-to-day life, right? As well as being pulled into more strategic placements, right? So this is how we envision this work working. We train you, we give you a few hashtags so you can follow and keep an eye on, you know, on when we're social distancing or just you're scrolling in your Facebook. I love Heather's like tips, right? Limit the toxicity. I'll be real. I'm very sensitive to the toxicity in conversation, right? And I limit myself to how much I allow myself to take it all in and respond to it, interact with it, right? So however you choose to do that in your day-to-day life, right? On your subway, right? And hopefully when we're back in the trains again, moving around, right? You'll have the tools and the skills and the places to just go and interact. If you're seeing conversations happening in your friend groups, in your own circles, you have the tools and the resources to intervene, right? So that's one methodology. It's more passive. It's on you. It's on your time, right? You have the tools and the skills. The other way is a bit more strategic, and I'm super excited about it, right? One way that we know that misinformation campaigns win and they pick up a lot of steam, one way we know that we get out-organized in the political left is that there are a lot of coordinated efforts on the right, that we're not really tapped into, right? So say, for instance, there's a conversation or there's a bill or piece of legislation or there's a political decision that needs
No, I haven't.
there's a decision that needs to be made in, so say Wisconsin, right? We will be able to tap into Wisconsin. We have the tools and the resources to identify who are the top influencers, what are the top influential conversations that are happening, what are the places that we need to be to really make a change. And then in theory, right, by the end of the next couple of months, we're gonna have hundreds of digital defenders and then thousands of digital defenders trained up and then deployed to those spaces, right, to really regain control of those conversations. Because a lot of times when you look at our progressive issues, the conversations and the most influential people in them are not our allies, are not folks who are on our message and who share our values, right? So our goal as digital defenders is really to tap into those spaces, right, and shift sentiment and shift the discourse, right? So we have our different areas that we're of course invested in the progressive left, right? We have our partner organizations that we work with. If it's Sierra Club, if it's Mi Gente, if it's Color of Change, whoever it may be, if they need support in a narrative intervention online, they'll come to digital offenders and we deploy towards it, right? And Noor will be working with you and coordinating a lot of that. Once we finish this training program, you'll all be added to a Slack network, right? A Slack channel where a lot of this coordination and support will be happening. We'll have issue area experts in those spaces. We'll have messaging experts in those spaces to help guide you and to also help fact check things if you need it, right? There's a meme going around, there's an article going around, you're not sure how to respond to it. This will be a place to do that, right? And this is especially important as we are dealing with a global pandemic right now, right? And there's a lot of fear and anxiety and a lot of misinformation, right? On day 3 of this training, we will have an expert on to speak about a coronavirus and just how to counter misinformation online. So that's something to look forward to as well, and where this work plays out. And then beyond all of this, of course, we have the 2020 elections that are coming up. We know from history, and we're already seeing the misinformation campaigns being driven. So digital defenders are going to play a crucial role in trying to correct some of that narrative.
Thanks, Aqib. We had one last question, if it's okay for me to ask this one, but I think it's a good one, which is, have you experienced toxic bullying from the alt-right, and how do you handle that?
I can say that there have been people who strongly disagree with the sentiments of my research. Whether or not you call it bullying is a separate question. I can also say that sort of the cycles of amplification and coordinated efforts that were previously alluded to happen to individual people with individual targets. I would recommend some basic digital hygiene for anybody doing organizing work or community work. That means making sure your passwords are strong and they're not used in more than one space. I would encourage you to make sure that the digital version of yourself is the kind of digital version that you would like others to see, which could mean looking yourself up on a search platform to make sure that, I don't know, some old stuff from 15 years ago is not the thing that necessarily represents you. And I would encourage you to set parameters. Again, this is really important for me because otherwise I just dig in. Parameters on how much you're going to engage with any particular person, which means pulling back when it becomes clear that that person is no longer interested in having a good conversation, a conversation in good faith in which persuasion is no longer possible. And if those sorts of things happen to you, document them. And I would reach out to maybe your cohort or your colleagues here for support. And having those sort of networks of support can help you stay in the fight longer.
Perfect. I see a few other questions like in the chat, but I think a lot of them will start to get addressed in the next portion of our program, right? which is going to be some small discussions among us. I said one of our goals of these trainings over the next few days is to build community. So we're gonna attempt to split everybody up into breakout rooms, right, with fellow participants. I invite you, if you're comfortable, to jump on camera, make some face-to-face connections if you can. If not, just unmute yourself. We will jump to the next slide, which has some guiding questions. It should stay up on the screen while we break into breakout rooms. If the questions do not stay on the screen, I will pop them into the little chat box, right? We invite you to